Rivera painted this image and all of these murals using a technique called fresco, which is Italian for fresh. Fresco, typically done on a plaster wall surface, was used in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and the Americas. Rivera chose an extremely difficult and labor-intensive fresco technique. Rivera scholar Linda Downs.
Mural making is kind of on the operatic end of art making. It requires a team of people to work together. It requires someone who knows the chemistry of limestone plaster and of natural pigments. Finer and finer layers of plaster are put on the wall from the rough coat, which is very gritty, to the finest layer, which has the consistency of smooth marble. So when the artist paints on the plaster, he paints when it's still wet.
As the plaster dries, the pigment is physically and chemically bound to the limestone and becomes part of the wall. Education Director Nancy Jones.
Before Rivera would start painting, the basic image that he wanted to paint would have been applied in a linear fashion onto the surface of the wall. This was done by placing a large drawing onto the wall and then pouncing the image onto the surface. You would run a roller with sharp points on it along the lines of the image so that they would penetrate the paper.
At this point, one of Rivera's assistants took a pouch filled with ground charcoal and tapped it along the outline, pushing charcoal dust through the holes in the paper. When the paper was taken down, you would see the outline of the image.
Then, before Rivera actually painted, the plaster would come in and cover the part of the wall that he intended to paint that day with wet plaster. So Rivera would use the part of the drawing that was still visible and what was in his memory of the original, and then paint the actual fresco.
He relied on 8 assistants to help him make the plaster, grind the pigment every day, draw the outlines of the composition on the second to the last coat of plaster. And then when the last coat of plaster was put up on the wall, the assistants would call Rivera and tell him that it was ready to paint.
The plaster dries quite quickly.
And in order to keep himself fresh and up to painting with a lot of vigor, he would wait until the very last minute before the plaster hardened to paint the images.
At this point, the pressure was on. Any mistakes that Rivera made could only be corrected by hacking out the plaster and starting over.